coming to you from the beautiful metaverse. And welcome to Midday with Rev Don. And I want to thank everyone who is joining us. And if you wish to take part in the conversation, feel free to add your comments to whatever platform you may be watching this on. They should show up in my chat room, and we can talk. And today I am neck deep in shipping. I am shipping out the statuary and jewelry that people have purchased. Also, Sir Ed is shipping out books. Hello to Ravenwolf in the chat room. Good to see you. You can kind of see the stack behind me that's being put together for mailing this afternoon. So very, very busy here. I was just speaking with Cosmo, my partner in Library of Horror, and assuring him that things will be less hectic soon. Right now, I have been totally focused on the quote sale of my life end quote. Hello to Stormy Lee in the chat room. That's a lovely name. Yeah, we've been very, very busy. We're almost down to the end. You can see my bookshelves emptying out. Many of my books have been sold online. Some have been sold privately. Others are going to local bookstores. 10,000 volumes was a lot to go through. And we're not quite at the end yet, but we're getting there. And hello to Cheryl May in the chat room. Good to see you. There are still a lot of things going up online. Check Sir Ed's Facebook page at facebook.com/EdAHubbard for the sale of books. Check my Facebook page, facebook.com/RevDonLewis for jewelry and altar items. Cheryl May asks, how much are the books? It depends on the book. I believe a number of them are being put up in groups. I think they're pretty decently priced. And if you go to Sir Edward's page, you can see for yourself. I know that with the jewelry, people have told me that I certainly could have priced it higher, and I certainly could have done. But I wanted to see it go to people that would appreciate it, people that were part of the tradition or otherwise involved in our projects. Cheryl Macy says she's from Calgary. Lovely to have you joining us. We do ship. We can ship there, but outside of the United States, I think we're probably going to have to ask for shipping. And in fact, what Edward's doing with the books, I'm not completely certain. With the jewelry, I have been including shipping within the United States. And yeah, that's where we're at. We're going through so many things, and it's a little overwhelming. Of course, there are things I'm keeping. It's going to be a very different thing not to have all this stuff. And I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. You know, one of the things I was thinking, oh, hello to Mary in the chat room. I was thinking, you know, this really is the end of my second Saturn return. And I always tell people that you know, Saturn return will put you where you're supposed to be, and that it's relatively painless if you don't fight it. And I'm moving on the assumption that at least in part is what is happening here. I've said several times I felt like this was the hand of spirit moving me, and I believe that it's also part of that Saturn return, that I'm going where I'm supposed to be, not necessarily where I thought I would be, and I'm okay with that. In my first Saturn return, more or less 30 years ago, you know, they're not a moment, they're a process. But I would have to say that I did fight the changes, and it was very difficult. And I think that's generally true if you fight the changes. This time, I kind of feel like I'm just riding the wave. Hello to Bradley in the chat room. Thank you so much for all your support, Bradley. Thank you, everyone, for all your support. We have a box for you, Bradley, right behind me. And, you know, it's been wonderful to see these things going to people that I know and care about. You know, I think I remarked the other day that had I simply died, I don't know what would have happened to them. They may have simply been dispersed. not necessarily to the people that I know and care about and am happy to see get them. So I feel like this is a good thing. People are asking about the move and when they can come and see me in Danville. So if you're interested in coming to see me in Danville, I should be settled by June 9th, I think, enough to receive guests. Jesse says hello in the chat room. Hello, Jesse. Jesse is very excited to get the 1888 edition of The Fairy Queen and all the other treasures. Thank you, Jesse. I'm glad to know that. We also have a box of jewelry for you. Jesse has been very supportive, and you know, this library did have a number of very rare books. The 1888 Fairy Queen was definitely one. I'm very happy to see Jesse get it. One of the things, moving off into the field to the left, about Dorothy Clutterbuck, the teacher of Gerald Gardner. A lot of people have tried to make out that she could not have been pagan, notably the book Triumph of the Moon. And one of the things that Triumph of the Moon attempted to claim is that her diaries showed that she could not be pagan because they were not pagan oriented. However, those diaries, significant excerpts have since been published, which tell a very different story. It's full of hymns and odes to pagan deities, and a lot of them to the Fairy Queen. And today, I don't know that a lot of people realize that in the late 1800s and early 1900s, a lot of people felt that the Fairy Queen in folklore was a synonym for goddess. All those poems to the Fairy Queen, when you consider that she obviously had studied these matters, which we know from other sources, they're pretty much a smoking gun. And if they're not, deities such as Aurora and others who are referenced in that diary, and also, for example, in the works of Leland, are a pretty strong case. There are also a lot of other things. But on the subject of the Fairy Queen, at one time, this was very much understood as an aspect of goddess. If you read the Vangelo delle Streghe, or actually I should say Aradia, the Gospel of the Witches, of which the Vangelo is part, Diana is referred to as Queen of the Fairies repeatedly. This used to be a big thing, less so now. Lady Mary Mary in the chat room says, I'm excited to get Lady Mabel's hats, and I'm excited to see you have them. I'm even more excited they actually fit. Yay. And you know, that's another thing. I wasn't necessarily sure where they were going to go. And Ravenwolf in the chat room remarks that it's weird how there was a question of what exactly does a pagan look like, or rather, how are we meant to look? And you know, I think that has to do with stereotypes and trying to break through stereotypes. I think there is a certain stereotype of all pagans looking alike. And certainly there are, like all stereotypes, there is a certain level of truth behind it. There have been certain styles that have been very common among pagan people, but that doesn't mean everyone is wearing them. And certainly media has portrayed us in a certain way. And we have portrayed ourselves in a certain way. Now, I always talk about how we must be in charge of our own image if we want the image that more truly reflects us. And that's one of the reasons we're doing Pagan World TV. One of the reasons we've done Magic TV all these years, to overcome those stereotypes. I found my little ram ring while selling jewelry. I was pleased to find that. And Mary says, yes, we're short with no beards and hairy feet. But that hobbit image is definitely not irrelevant to a lot of pagans. So I say we're coming down to the end of what we'll be offering online. We're not quite there yet, but we're coming. And There's not a lot more jewelry, for example, not a lot more altar items, but there are some. So please keep watching, and there may be a little bit more coming. There are a lot more books. Um, but we're continuing to work our way through as best we can, and we are moving along. And it's been a very interesting adventure. And yeah, I'm watching these things be dispersed around the world, not only within the United States. And although outside of the United States, we are having to ask for shipping because it's just that much more expensive. Within the United States, it's figured in, um, at least with the jewelry, and I think with the books, but I'm not certain. But we've been going through lots of things. Now, if anyone has anything they want to send me at this point, um, you should contact me. We'll probably have to have them sent to Lord Jason at this point to make sure that they actually get to me. Now, hello to Lynn in the chat room who asked, where can you purchase these items? And if you're looking for books, you can go to facebook.com/Ed A. Hubbard. If you're looking for the jewelry, you can go to facebook.com/Rev Don Lewis. There's a lot already there, jewelry and ritual items, and more coming. And plus, I'm also going to refresh some of the earlier postings that have not gone um, in the hope that they may yet. Because they've been going up for so long now that some of them are a long way down that page. And Lynn says, "Thank you." No, thank you. I hope that you will go and look at them, and maybe you'll find something you like. Um, I was very gratified the other night. At midnight, we got a large order for 8 different altar figures. And well, I think it was 6 altar figures and 2 pieces of jewelry. But that kind of made my night for me. And Raven Wolf asked, "How is your Patreon doing?" Well, we'll be having the chat room tonight on Patreon, as we are now doing. Um, Once this move is complete, I plan to really supercharge the Patreon. Right now, like everything else in my life, it's kind of behind the move. Um, but yeah, I need to pay more attention to that, and I hope to build it up still more. I'm hoping to have it be the first place that I post artwork and other creative pursuits. But obviously, I've not been doing any of that while I've been selling off the collections of my lifetime. But it's still done well, and I'm very grateful for all my patrons. And I am hoping to make that a much more active site in the future. And if you're interested in my Patreon, you can find it at revdonlewis.com. And Ravenwolf says, "I will help you advertise Patreon when you're set to go." Thank you, Ravenwolf. And of course, I have a good number of patrons already. But as I say, I do plan to up the content considerably once I'm able to focus on something other than moving. And I'm grateful for people's patience while I go through that. We have the Library of Horror returning very soon to Pagan World TV. I'm looking forward to that. The first film, Michael says, "I like the chair behind you." Thank you, Michael. I'm not sure I could ship that. Storm Lee asks, "Where can I find the jewelry again?" Facebook.com/Rev Don Lewis. And it's there. It's occasionally interrupted by other postings and photos. It goes down quite a long way. I have been removing pieces for the most part once they're sold, so what's left is mostly available. And let me just have a quick look at that page. And make sure that right at the top, you'll see this program, then you'll see a Mother's Day post honoring my mother, and then you'll see Nabamun hunting birds. You'll see a customized witch doll that I created, and then you get into the items. And as I say, they just keep going down because there's so very many. And I've been very gratified by the response. Very often, the pieces have gone even before um, first few minutes have elapsed. And that's been very gratifying. And I'm seeing pieces go to people that I consider good friends, members of the Karelian clergy. Hello to Jeffrey in the chat room. And Jeffrey says a possible shortcut is clicking on photos to see the listings. Oh, that's right. If you go to my page and you click on photos, that may actually give it to you faster than going down the page, because there are so many of them. My late mother left over 400 pieces of jewelry. In addition to which, there's also jewelry from my personal collection, a large amount of Lady Crystal's jewelry, and some of the various pieces of jewelry belonged either to my grandmother or great-grandmother Caroline, who founded the Karelian tradition, before they came into my mother's possession, before they came into my possession. And I think the last of Caroline's pieces that we're going to offer has gone, but I'm not certain about that. There may yet be something, but we are keeping the best pieces, of course. We are keeping a few pieces of my grandmother's jewelry. We're keeping some of Caroline's. We're keeping some of my mother's. But, you know, when we're talking about hundreds of pieces, we now are keeping just a few. The same with my library. I'm probably going to have 2 bookcases at the end that I will take with me. And that will comprise the books that I cannot find the information easily online. We're also taking books that will be of use to Pagan World TV in creating things like memes and possibly programs. One of the things that you see behind me here was the Encyclopedia of the Bizarre. And this was full of true stories that qualified as bizarre. And I've been thinking that if we were to use that for research to base a future program on, that it might be a fruitful occupation. Certainly not just to copy, but to begin, because it contains stories you will never find anywhere else. It was published in the early 70s. They're all written in a sensational tabloid style, but you know there are stories so obscure now, going back hundreds of years in some cases. Famous hauntings, famous UFO encounters, famous true crime stories, full of interesting things. So I'm definitely keeping that one. And yeah, there are a number of things that I will be keeping. And one of the things that will be happening is that you know, in the past, Sir Edward has often talked about being a living reality show, and I think that my life will be following this much more so than previously. So watch for a lot more broadcasting from me in the future. Cheryl May says that she loves true crime. There's some fascinating stories in that set. Another book I'm keeping is called Penny Dreadfuls, which is a compendium of stories from what used to be called Penny Dreadful magazines. These were 19th century publications put out very inexpensively with horror stories or serialized horror stories or mystery stories or so forth, but often horror stories that were very popular at the time. And one of the things this book contains is the original version of Sweeney Todd. Some people have thought Sweeney Todd was based on a true story. It was not. It was based on a serialized novel called The String of Pearls, not to be confused with the famous musical number, although it's kind of interesting to think of them together. And I was speaking with Laurie Blackman the other night, Sir Laurie Blackman, about this piece and how different the characters are in the original story. The hero of the original story is Joanna, who in the modern musical story is reduced to basically the wallpaper in the background. But she's the main character in the original. She is the heroic heroine who is pursuing the mystery and finally solves everything with help from a friend of her lost lover, who is also treated very differently in that original story. Sweeney Todd is very different in the original story. There is no romantic background to his character. He's just a cannibal killer. Mrs. Lovett is not insane at all. She is just a cagey businesswoman who doesn't mind eating people. But one of the things that's most interesting about this story is the prominent role of independent women in the story. There is one single chapter, and one of the things about the Penny Dreadfuls is that chapters are not all written by the same people. One is extremely misogynist, but the others are almost all what we today would think of as being feminist. Again, Joanna is the brave and intrepid heroine. Mrs. Lovett is shown as a very sound and cagey businesswoman, surviving on her own. She is not romantically involved with Sweeney Todd in this version. They are business associates on the dark side. It's a very interesting difference from what's been done with this. I really enjoyed reading it. It is, however, a 19th century serialized novel, so it's by modern standards a little long and rambling, but that's how they were. Many famous authors in the 19th century published this way as well. Charles Dickens notably published many serialized novels. And this is one of the reasons that some of those novels are rather long and winding to keep the readers interested month after month and to sell the magazine as long as you could. And if you enjoy 19th century novels with their length and their depth, I think they repay the time necessary to read them. One of the other things that's very interesting are the Russian novels of this period, which are even longer and even more deep than English language 19th century novels. If you've ever tried to read a 19th century Russian novel, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And by modern standards, they're much less focused and much longer than most of what is produced now. But if you were reading them through a Russian winter, that was probably highly desirable. And they provide a very interesting picture of that society that I don't think you could get anywhere else. I was reading Anya Karenina at one point. Never got through the whole thing because it's a Russian novel. But I got through quite a bit of it, and it was interesting because they're talking about aspects of 19th century Russian life I would never have imagined. And if you watch like the dramatic adaptations of Anya Karenina, you don't get those details. They cut them out because, of course, they're long and rambling. They just give you that main story, but in the novel, there are many other stories going on. And a great deal of what you might call local color. And this is the joy of a Russian novel. If you read ancient Roman novels, it's even more so. They often have chapter after chapter of barely related content that was the mode for this sort of writing for a very long time. The idea of our modern, very focused writing is very modern. One of my favorite novels is Joseph Andrews by Henry Fielding, which still follows that very old pattern of many digressions in the text, lots of little stories thrown in. But you have to remember how people read those novels. You didn't sit down alone to read that novel. Usually, it was read by a family as a group, night after night after night, usually through the winter, as a form of entertainment. And all those little extra stories added to that experience. Whereas to the modern reader, who's almost always reading in a solitary fashion, it's a different experience. If you have ever seen the movie Joseph Andrews, starring Anne Margaret as Lady Booby, you'll have an idea of what the novel is like. The novel actually is even more rambling and picaresque than the movie, but the movie actually did an unusually good job of capturing that style of novel. And I found it incredibly entertaining. I saw it not long after it came out, while I was still a teenager. And I thought it was absolutely charming. And the original novel is also. But you have to take it for what it is, a 19th century novel. If you have ever seen or read Joseph Andrews, you will know that it was basically a reply to a novel called Pamela. It was one of several replies to Pamela, which is often said to be the first modern novel. And Jesse says, we've made a family habit of reading aloud. Nothing Russian yet, but we have a good long series. We love a good long series of books, and that's wonderful. I think that's a good family activity. With Joseph Andrews, it was a response to Pamela, and Pamela often is considered the first modern novel. And it was about a pure and innocent maiden in service to a great family who ends up in love with the son of the family and has many travails along the way, but sticks to her honor and virtue throughout, and finally ends up winning the squire and becoming his wife. And this novel was incredibly popular and syrupy sweet, and very quickly produced less than respectful parodies. One of these was called Shemela, in which the virtuous heroine was not so virtuous. One of them was Joseph Andrews, which was about Pamela's equally virtuous brother, and how different this played with a male character. Because he basically attempts to follow his sister's example of being always honorable and virtuous, while being pursued by the lady of the house, Lady Booby, and all of the misadventures he goes through while trying to be an honorable person, finally to get to a happy outcome. I can't say I've ever read Pamela. I've read extracts of Pamela, but I love Joseph Andrews. It's immensely entertaining and very funny. But it's one of those things that's even funnier if you know the story behind it. I think at that point, it's the end of our half hour. It's time for our prayer and time to say goodbye for today. I expect to be back tomorrow. And I thank you for watching. I always love talking with you. And I love all of you. I'm glad to have you in my life. And I will see you again tomorrow. Now let us have our prayer. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to be with us and to guide us as we go forward. Help us to know what is of true worth in our lives and what is not. Help us to choose those things that enrich us and carry us forward, and to set aside those things that burden us. Help us to know our true friends from those who perhaps are not true, and to bond tightly to those who are true friends. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, we thank you. Beloved ancestors, we thank you. With great love and with respect, may the blessing be upon you now and always. And I thank you again for watching. I love you all, and may the blessing be upon you now and always.